She did very well at school. She was very much liked by the teachers because she was clever and industrious. One of the wonderful incidents at school was when we went to a parents' evening, and the Latin teacher, I said who I was. "Ah," he says, "Ruth Bridgewater," and he leans back in his chair and he said, "You have the privilege of teaching Ruth Latin, and you get paid for it." So I thought that was just the most wonderful thing to say about a child.
They used to call her Prudence at school. Was when she was at Pates, when she was at the girls' grammar school. She went to the boys' grammar in the sixth form. She used to have Christmas cards to Prudence, and she used to make them Christmas presents, like these sort of stuffed animals. One year, one of them gave her a haggis.
With all my schoolwork, she used to help me. All my chemistry books were copied from her books, which didn't stop me flunking.
When she went to school, she suddenly showed she had great talent in hand craftsmanship.
I've got some letters at home from my grandfather. He used to put, if you wrote to him, he used to write you these long letters in flowing green ink back, and used to always say hello to my little white mouse, because she was much the blondest of the grandchildren and very quiet compared to the others who were quite, the boys who were older, noisier, Ben, who never stopped talking.
I really got to know Ruth best when we both took a year out and did what was called in Newcastle a BMed Sci degree, and we did one in social health, and there was lots of teaching on sociology, statistics, social psychology, that sort of thing. And Ruth did a project on the use of alcohol among older people, and that was a general practice-based project. And she went round and interviewed older people about how much they drank, and found that people who drank a little bit were generally happier than people who didn't drink anything at all. I think Newcastle was a huge shock for both of us. It certainly was for me, and I think it was for Ruth as well. And I think that that really cemented our interest in the social causes of ill health and in political issues.
Ruth was wanting to study for the PhD, and she came to talk to me about it, and I thought it sounded really interesting, and so I became her PhD supervisor. Now, prior to that, Ruth had been studying at York, and she did a master's in women's studies. Women's studies is part of the sociology department, and it's funny because when we first met, we used to laugh about it, because to do a master's in women's studies isn't the archetypal thing that GPs do. And she used to say how some of her colleagues would think it was all about lentils and knitting patterns and so on, which I can assure you it wasn't. Her PhD was on somatisation or somatisers, and I was about to start defining it, but in a way that just reminds me that really what she was interested in was this notion of a somatiser, somatisation, and how people did define it, how academics defined it, how doctors defined it, and so on. But essentially it refers to people who present with physical symptoms, but they don't actually have physical symptoms, but it might be all in the mind, as it were. But that's hugely contentious. And her research actually involved going to do interviews with general practitioners to say, what do you understand by a somatiser? What does it mean? And I remember she came up with this data that the people she'd interview would always say, oh, well, if I knew you were going to ask that, I would have looked it up. But that's not what she was interested in. She was interested in how GPs themselves labelled patients as somatisers.
She wasn't too studious. That makes her sound a bit too straight-laced. I mean, she was, as I say, she was studious about what she was interested in lots of areas of healthcare, and she was conscientious about what she was interested in. I'm sure, like the rest of us, she just did the minimum to get through in many other areas.
She's always had good friends, but not always one of the crowd. And the friends she had, she always kept. And I think you'll find that if we're talking to other people, that she was a very good friend. And she was always very good to me.
She had good friends. Yes, she had, but she was very selective. Ruth was very selective, made very good friends. The friends she had, she made very good friends. But she never set out to be a popular person.
Ruth was very cautious, I think, in choosing her friends. She didn't have a huge friendship circle, and I think that she chose you as a friend.
There were enough things that we had in common and were interested in and respected each other for, that the areas where we were very different became intriguing.
Sometimes you have a problem and what you want is someone to say, well, if it was me, I'd do it this way. And she was really good at that. And you come in feeling a bit mopey and go off with a plan of action and almost you will report back on this and tell me how you're doing kind of thing. And that was great. So when I really just wanted a whinge, I had to come in and go, this is a teen sympathy one. No game plan.
Okay.
Don't put me right. Just don't tell me I'm an idiot. Just.
Ruth was certainly not a gossip in any way, shape or form. What you said to Ruth didn't go any further. But she was immensely kind to everybody, and also if I would be going off on one about, you know, something that had happened or something that had been said by some, she was always the person I could rely on to level me out.
Ruth was just kind of someone you could go and knock on the door and say, what shall I do about this, you know, cut on the head? And she was just a really good neighbour, a good friend.
She knew how to be truly supportive, didn't she?
Yes.
In ways that other people aren't able to be.
No.
And that was very, very special about Ruth. I mean, she didn't thrust her views on you. She would give you her opinion, but not really give you advice.
No, she would never give you, she would never tell you what to do. She would spend her time with people she wanted to spend her time with. She wouldn't, you know, be sat with people who were annoying her or she didn't agree with.
I am helplessly social. So I cannot stop myself from networking, meeting people, going out, spending time, and that wasn't where Ruth felt most comfortable.
You know, I was really quite wild, and Ruth was this very steady, tolerant presence who saw in me the things that I think are important and have lasted in me, and didn't take so much notice of all the, you know, the heavy drinking and chaos in my life that was going on for several years at medical school. And I'm so grateful to her for sticking by me and really bringing out what I think was the best qualities that I had at a time when they were a bit submerged from time to time.
I think one of the things that worked well between us was she enjoyed my comfort in social situations, and I enjoyed the fact that, you know, I could use her to be scary when I needed someone to be.
I'd actually been not drinking for quite a while. I'd been on the wagon, not because I'm an alcoholic or anything, just because I'd chosen not to drink, and Ruth really didn't drink either. But I thought, I'll take up a bottle of wine, because that's what you do when you first meet somebody and you're coming out at night. Well, we had this bottle of red wine, and it was... both of us were tipsy, so when Nick comes in, he takes one look at me, because he's never met me before, and one look at Ruth and goes, "You've been drinking?" And we're like, "Yeah." "Now, what about this case study? What is it?" "Oh, I don't know. Who gives a..." So that was sort of how we got to know each other really well, and it was great, because through Ruth helping me, I was able to go forward with my career, my chosen career, and I'll never forget that act of kindness, because it really was, because she was just about a total stranger to me, and the only person that offered to help me.
I think all the people you've spoken to, Ruth will have given help and advice to, and listened to their problems at some time or other. I think people just couldn't help going to her, if you know what I mean.
My husband was ill 3 years ago, was diagnosed with heart problems. She always came and asked how he was, but also asked how I was coping. He was going in for an operation, and she really surprised me by coming and saying to us that if I ever needed to speak to anybody, I could phone her at home. Yeah. And if she didn't know the answer, our brother was a heart surgeon, he would know the answer and she would get back to me about it, which was really nice, because, you know, it was support, it was over and above. Yeah.